If you're looking to lose fat, creating a calorie deficit is key. However, many people don't really know where to start or where to pull the calories from. So in this video, what we're going to do is break it down to the basics, along with explaining what protein, fats, and carbs actually do and how they benefit your training and your fat loss journey as a whole. So if your goal is simply just to lose weight, then creating a calorie deficit by reducing your calorie intake per day is over time going to help you lose weight. However, if your aim is to mainly lose fat and retain muscle mass, you need a little bit more thought that goes into it. You need to really focus in on the protein, fats, and carbs. And of those three, when it comes to weight loss, it is typically carbs that most people tend to pull from to create their calorie deficit. So for those of you wondering, why do people focus on carbs mainly when it comes to fat loss? It comes down to various reasons, but the main one being when people think of carbs, they think of pizza, donuts, cookies, cakes. All those things are super high in calories. When you cut those down, you are going to dramatically be in a deficit. However, all those foods I mentioned are also very high in fat as well, which is why they're so calorie dense. It's not simply just because carbs are evil. So obviously, if you're someone that typically eats those quite a lot per week, once you start reducing those down, you're going to start losing weight. And in their head, they're just going to associate with carbs. So that's the very basic level of it. But the more genuine reason is simply because some of the other macros as protein and fats are a little bit more fundamental to your body. And I'm going to explain why. Number one, when it comes to protein, not many people are overweight due to over-consuming protein. Typically, most people undereat protein, and you normally try and encourage more people to eat protein, especially if their aim is to actually build muscle. So for that reason, it's very rare that you'll see any fitness person really recommending anybody to reduce the protein intake to try and lose weight, because it's not the best way to create a calorie deficit, especially because it helps you building muscle, it helps you feeling more full so you don't overeat in general over the course of a day. And if you want to dive in a little bit deeper, protein also has like a thermic effect. And for those who don't know that, during the process of your body breaking down protein, it burns more calories. So in theory, if you eat more protein in your foods, your body will naturally burn off more calories during the process of simply digesting it. So that's like a little extra bonus plus. So now you can see why they don't pull from protein. So for those of you now that are thinking, but why not pull from fats a lot more? Especially because fats of the three of them is the most calorie dense. So in theory, yes, fats holds the most calories in them. However, most people do not eat enough healthy fats every single day. For example, myself, since getting into fitness and consuming a lot less fattier foods on the daily, I have to purposely try and increase my fat intake for the day. And that's simply because for the average man, you should be consuming at least 40 grams of dietary fat every single day, because it helps with things such as good hormone production, which includes testosterone. So for me, when I cut down on these fattier foods, I realized that sometimes I was barely scraping 30 grams of fat per day. And it's not just me, because I've had many clients that suffer with the same thing. Once they start cleaning up their diet, they realize that their fat intake is really low compared to what it normally would be. So tying it back to why people don't need to focus on fats too much is simply because due to the main reason that people overconsume fats is tied to carbohydrates. So it's the donuts, the cakes, the cookies. Once you've already started to address this, you're going to soon notice that your fat intake tends to drop down automatically as a byproduct. And if it does dramatically drop a little bit too low below that threshold that I mentioned, that's when you should intentionally try and make sure that you're picking out healthier fats. So those are the reasons why carbs almost gets most of the focus. So for those of you wondering, like, how much should you actually drop your carbs by? I would say the main common error when it comes to this is that people tend to then just use carbs, slashing them down to in half. And that is not the best thing to do. It can actually be a detriment to your actual progress, especially if you're someone that's aiming to keep muscle mass as well. So before we get into how it could be a detriment, the main thing to talk about is how much should you reduce the calories by? The key thing to know is that it's subjective to your starting point. So say, for example, you consume 350 grams of carbs per day on average. Instead of just thinking, oh, I'm gonna drop it to like 100 grams, be more gradual and drop it down to say 310 grams. So even though that small little drop from 350 to 310 grams doesn't seem like a lot, that's already in itself 160 calories, which is a pretty good start to a calorie deficit. However, the main problem is a lot of people just go on Google and just find some low calorie diet that's probably typically under 150 grams of carbs and just start following that, even if their prior diet was like 300 plus carbs, which is too much of a drastic drop. And if you do one of those big drops, you will definitely feel it in your daily activity, and especially during your training sessions. It's just too much of a change. So there's various reasons why your carbs shouldn't be too low, but the main ones I would say is simply because carbs is your body's preferred main source of energy. So throughout the day when you're moving around and you're exercising and stuff like that, for the most part, it typically is using carbohydrates to fuel your body to move around. So if you're someone that's in the gym aiming to build muscle and overall trying to look leaner, you're going to see a definite dip in performance if you just cut your calories pretty damn quick. And outside your training performance, you may notice a little bit of visual changes. For example, you may not feel as pumped up or look as pumped up as you typically do, simply because when you slash down your carbs, you got less glycogen or carbs in your muscles. So your muscle fullness is going to look flatter, which overall is going to make you appear like you've probably lost muscle, even though you probably haven't. So if you're someone that potentially has already done this and you're in this phase where you feel like kind of depleted, lethargic, low on energy because you've been on low carbs for a while, if your aim is to continually try and get leaner at this point still, I'll probably mix in some refeed days, maybe 2 days a week or something, to basically refuel your body with a little bit more carbohydrates to keep you going, and then just move back into your low carb diet. But overall, I would probably suggest for most people, unless you're at the end of like a long cutting period, I wouldn't be aiming to consume under 130 grams of carbs consistently. It's just too low and it's too hard to sustain for most people, and you're going to feel pretty run down typically when you eat so little carbs. So I definitely wouldn't recommend having that as your main diet year round. If you just bump up your carbs a bit, I guarantee you feel a lot more better, and usually when you feel better, your output becomes more. So if you've got more fuel in your body, you may be able to push yourself a little bit harder in the gym or in your daily steps or in your cardio, which in itself may be more beneficial to help your fat loss progress. So especially if you're someone that actually enjoys carbohydrates, I wouldn't purposely try to go against your natural nature and try and virtually never eat them, because it's going to be too hard to sustain. Which is why, in case any of you may be wondering, I don't recommend doing the keto diet either as a way to lose fat. It's not sustainable for like virtually most people on the planet. It's much better to have a much more balanced approach. Cutting out one whole macronutrient group, I would never recommend that. And just cutting out a whole food group just makes it so much harder when you're going out to eat with family and friends. And even for you on a daily basis, it just makes your whole life a lot more stress, because a much more flexible and balanced diet is a much more sustainable approach for 99.9% of the world. Maybe if you have a specific thing you're trying to quickly drop down weight for, maybe, but as a year-round diet, never would I personally recommend it. That fat loss and weight loss is two different things. If you're aiming to lose weight, then yeah, just cut your calories down. However, if your aim is to improve your body composition by losing fat and building muscle on the way, you have to be a lot more conscious and have a little bit more common sense, learn a little bit more about nutrition, and overall make small changes across your whole lifestyle to gradually improve, and over time just aim to get better and better and better. So the best thing to think about is, when it comes to any diet or workout plan or anything in life, to be honest, if you can't see yourself doing it in a year from now or 6 months from now, you shouldn't even bother start, because the chances is that there's a much better approach that you should probably take to get there, rather than trying to do shortcuts or something that's going to ultimately lead to you quitting. Anyways, if you want to see more fitness tips videos, be sure to hit up there and watch any one of these videos.